I'll never forget that morning. The day I walked into Grant & Company just like any other day. Pushing my mop cart in my faded navy uniform. Head down. My name is Linda Brooks, 48 years old, and for 15 years. I'd been the cleaning lady no one ever noticed. To them, I was invisible. A shadow sweeping floors while executives in polished shoes and tailored suits rushed past me. Every night, I pushed that cart down the top floor hallway. The city lights of Chicago gleaming through the glass walls. I scrubbed spilled coffee, picked up forgotten papers, and sometimes overheard things that weren't meant for someone, like me, to hear. But the one place I remember most was Harold Grant's corner office, the CEO. It was always a mess. Papers scattered, coffee cups stacked, and the air thick with arrogance. I'd heard him laughing loudly as he fired people without a second thought. Bragging about cutting the fat. I never said a word. I just kept mopping, but I was always watching. And then, on a random Tuesday, something shifted. Someone had spilled coffee near the elevator, probably one of Harold's own crew. As I bent down to clean it, he strutted in, pointed right at me, and barked, "Hurry up, Grandma. Stop standing around." Laughter erupted from the staff around him. They all laughed. I stood there, mop in hand, face burning with humiliation. I wanted to shout back, to tell him he had no right to treat me that way. But instead, I stayed quiet. I was still, just the cleaning lady. That night, alone with the silence and the scent of bleach, I made a quiet vow to myself as I looked out at the Chicago skyline. That's the last time Harold Grant mocks me. He's going to pay. You see, I wasn't always just a cleaning lady. 15 years ago, my late uncle, Robert Delaney, a savvy but humble investor, left me something unexpected when he passed away, a significant share in Grant & Co. At the time, I was just trying to make ends meet after my divorce. I could have sold those shares and walked away, but something told me to hold on to them. And so, while I scrubbed toilets and wiped down desks, I was also quietly watching my inheritance being mismanaged by men in $2 suits. For years, I kept my head down. But after that humiliating, "Grandma" moment in the lobby, I'd had enough. I called an old friend, Marcus LeBlanc, a corporate lawyer I used to know back when life was different. "Marcus," I said, "I'm done staying quiet. It's time to clean house, literally and figuratively." We met at a tiny diner out in the suburbs. No cameras, no suits, just greasy fries and years of frustration bubbling beneath the surface. I told him everything. How Harold laid off janitors and secretaries just to pad the quarterly reports. How he bragged about cheating vendors out of contracts. And how I'd seen him shred papers late at night that no one else dared question. Marcus looked at me, eyes sharp. "You're the majority shareholder now, Linda," he said. "He doesn't know that, but you've got enough to call for a board meeting and end this." I nodded, my hands shaking around my coffee mug. 15 years of being ignored, dismissed, laughed at. It was all about to change. That night, I stayed late at the office again, pretending to mop while I secretly photographed trashed documents and confidential memos that Harold carelessly discarded. Every click of my phone camera felt like another brick falling from the wall he'd built around himself. One night, I overheard him on the phone laughing. "The board? They don't care as long as I make them rich. I could fire the whole bottom floor and still get a bonus." He had no idea that the janitor he just insulted owned more of the company than he did. He was about to find out. That morning, the boardroom of Pinnacle Enterprises buzzed with laughter and chatter. Expensive suits lined the long mahogany table, and the scent of fresh espresso filled the air. Victor Lang, the current CEO, lounged at the head of the table. Legs crossed, coffee in hand, radiating authority like a king on his throne. He had no idea that within minutes, everything he had built through manipulation and cruelty would come crashing down, and the person bringing the storm was none other than the invisible cleaning lady he had mocked for years. Clara entered the boardroom wearing her old cleaning uniform. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were steady. A few heads turned briefly, then looked away, assuming she had walked into the wrong room. But she moved forward with purpose, stopping at the table and placing down a thick folder. The room fell silent. Victor raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing here? This room's for board members, not janitors." Clara looked him straight in the eye. For the first time in years, she didn't look down. "I'm here as a shareholder. In fact, I'm the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Enterprises. I own 52% of this company. Shares my uncle left me." A few people snorted, unsure whether to laugh. Victor let out a loud, mocking chuckle, but Clara remained composed. She calmly opened the folder and handed over a notarized copy of the ownership documents to Tom, her lawyer, who had just entered the room at her signal. "These are legal documents confirming my ownership," she said firmly. "And here," she pulled out printed emails, photos, and accounting records, "is proof that Victor Lang has been embezzling company funds, unlawfully firing employees, and using abusive language toward staff." A deep, eerie silence took over. One of the younger board members began flipping through the papers with a pale expression. Victor shot up from his seat, shouting, "This is slander. No one's going to believe a janitor." Clara stood up too, no longer trembling. Her voice was calm but sharp as a blade. "I'm not just a janitor. I'm the one who's been quietly documenting everything you've done, watching you abuse your power while I cleaned the messes you left behind. I've been waiting for the right moment. This is it." Tom stepped forward, legal papers in hand. "All evidence has already been submitted to the proper authorities. Under company bylaws, a majority shareholder has the right to remove a CEO if they present clear proof of misconduct and unethical leadership." Victor slammed his fist on the table. "You don't have the right." A senior board member across from him spoke coldly. "She has the majority vote. That's all the right she needs." Victor's face turned red as he looked around the room, seeking support, but no one moved. A few pulled out their phones. Others whispered to their assistants. "You're finished, Victor," Clara said firmly, "effective immediately. You're fired as CEO of Pinnacle Enterprises." The boardroom erupted into hushed voices. Victor stood frozen, fists clenched, face drained of color. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed toward the door, only to be greeted by company security waiting outside. Clara turned back to the stunned board. Today, things change. No more firing people just to inflate profits. No more treating staff like they're disposable. This company will be run with integrity from now on. Several board members slowly nodded. Clara wasn't done. She pulled out her phone and showed a picture of the overnight cleaning crew. "These people, the ones who keep this place running, deserve raises. Starting now." At first, there was silence. Then, one person clapped, then another. Applause grew, not thunderous, but steady, the kind that comes from genuine respect. After 15 long years, Clara was no longer invisible. She was finally being seen and heard. Victor wasn't done yet. As Clara left the boardroom, she spotted him in the parking lot, pacing wildly, yelling into his phone like a trapped animal. She didn't stop. Her mop bucket clattered behind her for the last time. By that evening, her phone lit up with headlines. CEO ousted in stunning shareholder coup. Janitor turns owner, Victor Lang under investigation. Regulatory authorities had already begun freezing Victor's accounts. His yacht was seized. Online, people called him a fraud and a bully. Clara smiled from her modest couch, feeling the weight of justice, not revenge, but restoration. For the first time in her life, she didn't just win. She reclaimed everything they said she could never have. The next morning, the air inside Pinnacle Enterprises felt different. No longer did Clara enter the building in her old uniform, head bowed, pushing a mop bucket that squeaked across the floor. Today, She walked in wearing a simple but elegant navy blue blazer and dark jeans. No name tag, no cart, just confidence. The front desk receptionist, who had once ignored her for years, stood up instinctively. "Good morning, Ms. Thompson," she said with a nervous smile. Clara nodded gently. "Morning." As she passed through the lobby, people stopped what they were doing. They turned, some confused, others wide-eyed. There was no announcement needed. Word had already spread like wildfire. Whispers floated through the air like smoke. "That's her. She really owns the company? She fired Victor." In the break room, the overnight cleaning crew waited, half afraid, half hopeful. Miguel, the most senior among them, approached her with wide eyes. "You really did it?" Clara smiled and handed him a steaming coffee. "Not alone. But yeah, we did." The room erupted in soft cheers and high fives. Some of them had watched her mop floors for over a decade, never suspecting the power she quietly held. To them, she was living proof that patience wasn't weakness, it was strength disguised. Later that morning, Clara stepped into Victor's old office. The corner room still had the same skyline view, the same intimidating furniture, and even his old espresso machine, which she quickly unplugged. But everything else had changed. On her desk, a framed photo of her late uncle sat beside a small sign she'd brought from home. "Lead with kindness. The rest will follow." The first item on her to-do list? Staff dignity. She immediately approved raises for the cleaning crew, instituted anti-harassment training across departments, and froze the layoffs that had been planned for the upcoming quarter. A memo was sent out company-wide. Pinnacle's future will not be built on fear. It will be built on respect, fairness, and accountability. That same day, a former janitor named Susan, who had been fired years ago for asking for a sick day, sent Clara an email. It was just one sentence, but it made her eyes well with tears. "You gave us our dignity back." Meanwhile, Victor's downfall played out like a slow-motion disaster. Cable news programs featured segments with headlines like, "CEO's empire crumbles overnight. Victor Lang's assets seized in wake of fraud allegations." Even worse, someone leaked the security footage of his office tantrum after being fired. It went viral. The once feared executive was now a meme, red-faced, screaming, flipping over his own desk like a child denied a toy. At one point, Victor attempted a comeback. A lawyer showed up at Pinnacle's reception with a lawsuit in hand, claiming Clara had manipulated the board. She met him calmly, standing in the same lobby where she once scrubbed marble tiles. "Here's my uncle's will," she said, handing over notarized proof. "Here's the shareholder agreement. Here's the board vote." The lawyer scanned the documents, swallowed hard, and left without saying another word. 2 days later, a judge dismissed the case entirely. Victor Lang was officially finished. Clara didn't gloat. That wasn't her style. But she did allow herself one small celebration. That evening, she met Tom at the same diner where they'd first plotted everything. He slid her a root beer float across the table. "You know you're a legend now, right?" he said, grinning. Clara laughed. "I'm not a legend, Tom. I'm just someone who got tired of being silent." Outside, the lights of Chicago glowed like stars, the same city where she'd mopped floors for 15 years without thanks. But now, everything looked brighter, not just for her, but for every voice that had been ignored for too long. She had been invisible. Now, she was unstoppable. 1 year after Victor Lang's dismissal, Pinnacle Enterprises had become an entirely different place. There were no more condescending looks from executives. No more secret meetings about cutting staff to boost profit margins. Instead, there was light, the light from smiling faces. From employees who finally felt heard, respected, and most importantly, seen. Clara was still there, not in the old navy blue uniform with a mop bucket, but in a simple blouse and a confident smile. Yet she never forgot the past. On her new desk, the one that once belonged to Victor, sat a small framed quote. "I'm not here for power. I'm here to fix what was broken." She spent her time talking with employees. She listened to the voices of those once overlooked. She added a new coffee machine in the break room. She bought better gloves for the janitorial team. Rearranged shifts so they could get home earlier to their kids. To Clara, these weren't acts of kindness, they were the bare minimum of justice. The media still referred to her as the cleaning lady who became CEO. But for Clara, titles weren't what mattered, it was the message. One afternoon, walking down the hall, she saw Miguel, a former member of the cleaning crew, patiently teaching a new employee how to properly clean the windows. He smiled, proud, and Clara smiled back. She knew. Real change was happening. She had once been mocked, overlooked, treated as invisible, but because of that, she could see more clearly than anyone else the injustices others ignored.